Students, astrologers, and curious explorers of the arcane, you have just been accepted into the prestigious Academy of Rea Lucaria, where heroes of the stars can shine their brightest. Every great idea begins with a vision, a quest for mastery of the unknown, and a yearning to distinguish oneself as a student of lunar magic. Maximize your talents by learning unique sorceries. Explore the wealth of alchemical knowledge contained in our libraries, and nurture your understanding of the moon herself. Here at Rea Lucaria, the concept of different does not exist. We encourage the strange and peculiar, and celebrate your proficiency all the same. For our focus on the unconventional is more than just wishful thinking. It is the future. It is your future. We are more than just an academy. We are a family with the common pursuit of mastery beyond the stars.
Okay, so I'm just gonna be upfront. I had no idea how to actually categorize these. Obviously, each sigil represents a different school of magic. That separation was simple enough, but some schools of magic, like the Carian sorceries, presented like 7 different subtypes of magic that all fit within the same family. And I felt like this would give a class as broad as Carian sorceries a bit of an unfair advantage when ranked with other schools of magic that only have like 3 spells. Also, Stormveil has its own sigil, but isn't technically a school of magic, like in terms of gameplay. So I'm gonna helicopter over to Edgar really quick and just ask for a bit of guidance on this, because I kind of have no idea what to do here. Or at least that's what I would have done if my modding and recording tools actually fucking worked, but I literally, as I'm recording this, the game just updated to 1.08, so enjoy this pointless footage of me rolling around like a fucking idiot instead. Edgar, I need your help, quickly!
Stop yelling. I'm literally 2 feet from you.
Why do you sound weirdly American all of a sudden?
I don't know. Why do your past like 9 videos sound like you recorded them in the bathroom?
I just finished Elden Ring on NG+7 and now I'm bored. I'm very bored.
And your first idea was to helicopter over here and make that my problem?
I pushed myself to burnout finishing this game, and now I need a new game to play. I need to fly away.
What?
I need to fly away from the lands between, preferably on a plane. Maybe an F4J Phantom 2. Do you like planes?
Rusty, I swear if this is a fucking sponsor, I'm getting up and I'm
Have
leaving.
you heard of War Thunder? War Thunder is a massively comprehensive vehicle combat game with over 2,000 armored cars, tanks, battleships, stealth bombers, helicopters, planes, all crashing into each other in one of the most dynamic combined arms PvP experiences you've ever played. All of them have intensely detailed models right down to their individual components, anything from camouflages to historical markings that identify your vehicles as, well, yours. War Thunder has selectable vehicles dating all the way back to the 1920s, so if you ever wanted to take out a contemporary stealth aircraft with a fucking biplane, this is the only game you can do that. And if you use my link, you can get yourself started with a big-ass bonus pack with premium vehicles, boosters, and all kinds of crazy trinkets you can use to enact war on those dirty naysayers that have different opinions than you. You can get it on PC, PS5, Xbox Series X or S, and even consoles from the previous generation. Glintstone sorcery is the largest group of sorceries that cannot possibly be simplified any further than they already are. This sorcery type encompasses some of Elden Ring's major endgame sorceries, while also housing some of the most rudimentary beginner spells you'll come across in Limgrave. Everything from flinging ethereal pebbles to launching a primal cosmic space ray, Glintstone basically has it. It's the proud home of the age-old technique of holding down a goddamn button for 10 whole seconds and uploading those spicy hitless runs to YouTube like you did something significant. It's basically the Walmart supercenter of spell types. It has everything you need and more, but only at the expense of your self-respect. And right around here is where you're going to start seeing exactly why Carian sorceries were such a huge pain in the ass for how I wanted to make this video. Loretta sorceries technically fall under the umbrella of Carian, yet they're thought of as their own subcategory, as are the Crystalian sorceries and the Clayman sorceries, each of which have very similar sigils to the Carian sigil. Well, since the Carian's like hogging the fucking power pool, I'm just gonna keep things simple and include the Sword, Glintblade, and Loretta sorceries in this section, as well as a couple others like Magic Downpour and Lucidity. The Sword sorceries are basically a gateway into pure caster builds builds. The Glintblade fouling spells have lots of applications despite looking so simple and are great at chewing up enemy poise, and Loretta's Great Bow just oozes style, even if it's not the greatest damage. You've got the Carian Slicer for that anyways, all while offering a little extra counterplay with Carian Retaliation that allows you to deal with receiving magic spam. I've never fancied pure caster builds, but the Carian Sword and Glintblade sorceries are the only instance where I've legitimately come close to trying it. This magic school has plenty of different applications, it's friendly to just about every playstyle, and if it weren't for those Glintblade spells, we wouldn't be seeing any Virgil moveset mods that actually look like Virgil. There are, three. There are three of these. There are three Crystalian sorceries. It's not exactly the most versatile set of spells out there. All three of these sorceries involve shooting crystals in a somewhat forward direction, as they all even share the same shotgun-like cone shape in their spread that only ever gives you good results if you're practically shoving your staff between someone else's ass cheeks. If you want a shittier Comet Azer that only takes up a single spell slot, then I guess feel free to give the Crystal Torrent a whirl. Otherwise, most of these don't feel all that fun to use. They have insane damage potential if you know how to build a character specifically around these sorceries, but let's face it, this is Elden Ring. That's not exactly special. You could tailor a build around throwing rocks and still get adequate damage if you know how to do math. I'd hang on to that Crystal Staff though, because once you start pushing your intelligence into the 70s, that scaling is going to fucking throttle. The Snow Witch build is the Snow Witch build, as in there's one of them. I tend to count Ranni's Dark Moon in with the cold sorceries because of the extra frostbite buildup it has, but if you aren't including that, then there are only 5 spells you have access to. The good news is they all feel and play different enough to actually warrant them being the foundation of a nice build. Ice Crag is a simple, straightforward projectile, Freezing Mist and Zaymore Ice Storm give you some decent AoE options, Frozen Armament is a nice enough weapon buff, and Moonblade is a goddamn war machine. The description of Moonblade also gives you some nice lore that's actually pertinent to Ranni, which is why I tend to include Dark Moon in this magic school. I just still wish we had a little more to choose from, but the 5 we have are a perfectly capable set. No complaints. Most other magic schools seem to just offer a specific type of elemental damage, making the Night School one of the most unique spell sets in the game. Instead of racking up damage with fire and lightning, Night Sorceries put a heavy focus on utility and guard piercing. The Night Shard and Comet spells have the added benefit of piercing shields, and most capable enemies won't even attempt dodging it because they don't even see it coming. Eternal Darkness is wonderful for countering magic spam. I found this especially useful in Rhea Lucaria. Night Maiden Mist does surprisingly high damage, and its hitbox is big enough to even hit Renala during her first phase when she's in the air, and Ambush Shard makes you feel like an inept fucking moron if you get hit by it. I'm a bit salty that the Unseen Blade doesn't work on infused or special weapons, which eliminates the whole reason I would ever use a spell like this, but the Unseen Form sorcery allows you to trivialize the entire Ordina Everjail, and for that reason, I would at least consider giving this school a B. You know how you have a really choice outfit that you can never seem to part with, even though the stats are downright putrid? That's me with the Clayman sorceries. They were just weird and uncanny enough to not be grouped with the rest of the Carian spells, yet there are only 2 of them. Bubble and Bigger Bubble. I'm sorry, what the fuck? I'm not frustrated at the fact that you made me blow bubbles at my enemies to deal damage. I am not even frustrated that you only gave me 2 spells. What gets under my skin is that you gave me these 2 spells, followed by an entire line of weapons with unique skill variants of those same spells that seem to outperform them on almost all accounts. I cannot confidently say there is any reason to use these simply because the Envoy Horns exist, and you'd be better off respecking to Faith and pouring your resources into one of those weapons instead. It's better damage, better stagger, Papa John's. I gave the Cold Sorceries a B earlier because it had 5 spells that seemed to synergize really well with each other, and you might deem it unfair of me to give the Gravity Magic School a higher rating despite Gravity spells having objectively less variety. You have a total of 5 sorceries, and 2 of them are straightforward upgrades to previous spells that are literally meant to replace the others, so if we want to be mean, then there's really only just 3. But the reason I think so highly of Gravity Sorceries is the fact that they have so much unexpected synergy with many different talismans, buffs, and other builds overall. Having a sorcery build that's able to deal physical and magic damage is a massive utility. Never in my life have I seen dragons go down quicker than when they're targeted by Meteorite of Estelle, and being able to pull enemies towards you can give you an opportunity for some pretty hilarious environmental kills. Gravity Well and Collapsing Stars can both insta-stagger flying enemies, and it turns out birds are significantly less annoying after being spiked into the floor by a gravitational fly swatter. There's no variety in these sorceries whatsoever, and hopefully they'll be expanded on a little with future DLCs, but when you're opening a space rift and calling down meteor showers capable of dishing out thousands of DPS on large targets, variety is probably the last thing you give a shit about. If I were to have made this video back in the summertime when we were actually wondering when they were ever going to finally pay attention to fixing waves of darkness, I would have given the Magma school a hard middle C. The only excitement I ever got from using Magma-related sorceries was pointing roiling magma directly at the ground in front of me and then switching to a gravity sorcery to take some poor fucker hostage and pull them into the explosion. Galmier's Fury used to be a box of crap, but the projectile speed has been upped quite a bit since then, and you can see a massive improvement in the consistency of the area covered by the magma. The magma sorceries deal fire damage. Wow, that was an actual sentence that I just wrote. I'm gonna leave it in too. Rykard's Rancor can easily shred big enemies like dragons and trolls, but sometimes it'll just take this anticlimactic nosedive into the floor after only being up for like 2 seconds. Nothing here is exceptional, nor is it really terrible, but it's still a magic school that I can always manage to have a bit of fun with. Fire also kills everything in this game, so there's that. The Aberrant Sorcery School focuses primarily on bleed damage and gets boosted by the Staff of the Guilty. Using these sorcerers separately is a mistake. Just don't do it. If you really want to squeeze out every bit of potential, you need to be using these interchangeably. Briars of Sin is an AoE spell that can be chained into a 3-hit combo, each AoE getting wider with each cast, and Briars of Punishment is a cluster of thorns that crawl across the ground and home into the nearest enemy. Using these frequently requires a small investment into regen because these two spells siphon a bit of your HP upon use. Really though, moving forward, any school of magic that only gives me 2 spells to work with is locking themselves into a C or lower. I can't stand seeing this. They also exclusively deal magic damage, which I don't think really fits the look of the sorceries. The slower than ideal casting speed combined with the eventually taxing health sacrifice required to keep up any sort of reliable offense really just puts these on the back burner for me. I can see potential here with the Thorned aesthetic. They certainly look cool, but when looking cool is your only asset, that's not a sorcery, that's a paperweight. The Prince of Death School of Magic contains mostly Ghostflame sorceries with the exception of Fia's Mist, which deals Deathblight buildup. So if you're not interested in PvP, then that's one wasted sorcery slot right out of the gate. This is a perfect example of why you shouldn't fall in love with potential. I'm not sure how all these spells and abilities became so polarizing in gameplay, but the Prince of Death spell set seems to house some of the best and worst sorceries. Rancor Call and Ancient Rancor surprisingly are on the good end, but the asking price is an extremely high investment towards intelligence, making them strictly mid to in-game sorceries. Explosive Ghost Flame deals tons of damage at once and then leaves you sucking your thumb for about 7 seconds during the recovery time. Tivia's Summons can go scrape shit off the rim of a public toilet seat. I'm not kidding. I don't think I've ever nurtured such a visceral hatred for the spell more than I have this one. It's clearly the weakest link, but I mean the other spells can be worth checking out. It's a C. It's just a C. So there are technically 3 different types of fire incantations, being Fire Monk, Giantsflame, and a few other incantations that have no identified school. Gameplay-wise, there's little to no difference, especially since the Giant Seal just ends up boosting them all anyway, but I still think it's an important enough distinction to make. The Fire Monk School of Magic gives you a hefty 6 incantations to choose from. Anything with an exclamation point at the end of it belongs to the Fire Monks, while Flame Sling, Fire's Deadly Sin, and Catch Flame are considered to be nameless outliers that don't bear any sigil. But what really gives the Fire Monk School a huge advantage over others is its selection of supportive incantations. Flame Cleanse Me is a great counter against anything rot related and is insanely helpful for exploring the Lake of Rot, all while not asking a huge faith investment from the player. Grant Me Strength increases your physical and fire damage, making it doubly applicable if you have a flame affinity weapon. Protect Me, on the other hand, is a very strong fire defense tool that helps out with dragon enemies. Despite only being a single element, I'm honestly extremely impressed with the amount of versatility this spell set can give you. The Giantsflame incantations are immensely more powerful than their Fire Monk counterparts, as they're designed to be, but there are only 4 of them. This isn't inherently limiting by itself, especially considering your character will be using these in tandem with the Fire Monk incantations, and that's certainly not to say they're less spectacular. Giantsflame take these more or less a fucking Harrier strike in the palm of your hand. Flame Fall upon them is another shotgun-esque scatter spell that sees most of its potential when thrown directly into someone's face. Burn of Flame is surprisingly consistent considering its large AoE and random fire pillar placement. All things considered, medium-sized enemies still usually get hit at least once or twice if within range. It's just more fire incantations is all it is. They're better, but they're less plentiful, just as they're designed to be. Try looking at the Two Fingers Incantation School as baby's first prayer, and you'll have a lot more respect for this spell set. They're elementary at best and just downright underwhelming at worst, but none of these incantations have an insanely high faith requirement to take advantage of. Even if you're focused on building a sorcerer character, a small investment into faith can make a good number of these spells usable. It mostly comprises basic heals and damage negation spells, the one exception being the Cure Poison incantation, and I'm pretty sure I don't need to explain what that one does. The Rejection incantation probably provides the most fun out of all of these, and that's only because it's really easy to turn something like crowd control into an offensive tactic in this game. Otherwise, they're nothing special. Once again, they were kind of designed to be like that, so I'm giving this a hard middle C, and I don't really think anyone would disagree with that. Yeah, don't sweat it. I'd want to be hidden from view using these too. The actual functions of the spells really aren't that bad. I love the idea of actually infiltrating castles using stealth incantations and various concealing tools and the like. It's really too bad that all the functions of these spells you can either find in consumables or as inherent abilities in armor, as is the case for the Assassin's Approach. Darkness blinds your enemies and allows you to escape unscathed, but it's only for a couple of seconds and it comes at a massive 24 FP cost, making it a much more taxing investment than it would be to just lure an enemy into attacking and then use their recovery time to charge up a longer spell, or just run away. Literally running away costs 0 FP, and it's just as effective as this. Shadow Bait lures out aggressors as a means of divvying up enemies into smaller fights, but the drastically huge drawback is that it only works on human enemies, and omens for some reason. So the most impressive aspect of this spell is, oh my god, look, it works. It takes unaware enemies and moves them somewhere else. Yeah, I'm sorry, this ain't it. Erdtree incantations are mostly regen spells peppered in with some damage negation abilities, but if that sounds like a lackluster description, it's only because I think these incantations have to actually be played around with in order for you to see what's so great about them. With the right build centered around some of these regen spells, you can pretty much throw your Crimson Flask to the wayside because you just won't even need it anymore. Barrier of Gold and Gold and Lightning Fortification provide great defense against magic and lightning respectively, and Wrath of Gold is essentially a rejection spell that's been torqued out of its mind. And it has the Black Blade incantation. With Erdtree Seal and the proper talismans, this motherfucker can easily hit for upwards of 5k damage a swing, and you look sexy as hell pulling it out. The Crucible incantations are technically part of the Erdtree school, but I felt like ranking them separately due to these incantations standing out very well on their own, while also being more versatile than I think people give them credit for. The Breath incantation is a great fire damage option that feels very similar to most Dragon Communion incantations, only you have the extra privilege of being able to actually move around a bit. The Horns require a bit of timing due to its low startup poise, but there's not a single enemy that won't get pancaked by this charge. The tail can feel underwhelming at first, but it's great at making space if you're being swarmed by 2 or 3 dudes that thought they'd have an easy time ganking you from behind or something. Absolutely 0 people are out there saying this is the perfect group of incantations, like, don't get me wrong, but they have some great uses and then some. The Golden Order Fundamentalists have some pretty dope incantations and some not as much. Spells like Discus of Light actually manage to take the Way of White spells from DS3 and make them function worth a fuck, but others like Litany and Order's Blade seem to only perform in very specific situations like chewing through skeletons and Deathbirds a bit quicker. Radagon's Ring deals exceptional damage against pretty much everything that doesn't have holy resistance, and it's a great space maker against smaller dudes if you've backed yourself into a corner. Most of these are actually pretty damn nice, and even the more underwhelming incantations still perform very well against what they're supposed to. The only thing keeping me from ranking it any higher than a B is that these incantations don't really fit into faith builds unless you're just planning to use the Golden Order seal out of the gate. Some of these spells have pretty nasty intelligence requirements in order to unlock them, and that doesn't mean they're bad. If anything, they're extremely useful, and with a few tweaks they can easily end up hanging with the greats, but being barred behind multiple stat requirements is a pretty huge problem in a game where some weapons and spells have stat prerequisites reaching into the 60s. The Bestial School of Magic is certainly not looking to be the centerpiece of any build. It knows what it's worth, and I guess that's kind of why I like these so much. The highest faith requirements this school will ever ask of you is a measly 15 for Gurank's Beastclaw. It's mostly a physical school that specializes in dealing multiple types of physical damage, most notably being slash damage from the 2 claw incantations, and I say that because there's a lot of people thinking these spells provide damage similar to someone coughing on you, when in reality there's just a few enemies with high slash defense that won't make these stand out as much. The Bestial Sling has long been a favorite of mine, and many others apparently for a while, but 1.07 has a few people questioning their loyalty lately. It no longer works with arrow's reach, meaning you have to be much closer in order to get the full damage out of it, but Constitution can be pretty useful even in the end game due to its ability to nullify blood loss and frostbite. A grand total of 12 incantations for this one school alone, which is already a massive benefit. Despite them all being the same element, they're extremely versatile. Some of them can't be dodged and hit instantly, some of them can buff attacks, some even inflict additional elements like Death Blight and Frostbite. The Ancient Dragon incantations don't involve actual straightforward projectiles as much as they do large area damage, but that's also what makes them some of the most powerful incantations in the game. Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike, for instance, can hit multiple times on the same target, making them extremely useful against dragons and other giant enemies. Fortisac Spear also has that one weird benefit where if an enemy is down below you somewhere and you're right at the edge of a platform, you can aim one straight down and it'll probably kill whatever you're aiming at. I was really tempted to give these an S, but the fact that lightning levels with Faith on a seal and Dex on a weapon will never not bother me. Like, I've even caught myself modding in actual Faith scaling for weapons thinking that'll just solve the problem, but no, it's literally impossible for lightning to level with Faith if on a weapon. The Dragon Communion School offers 13 incantations, technically 14 if you're counting Placidusac's Ruin, of varying elemental damage, status, and utility. These are heights that every other school of magic should strive to achieve. And I'm only counting Placidusac's into this category because having an entire extra section with only one spell makes no fucking sense. More maneuverability was added to spells like Dragon Claw and Dragon Maw in 1.07, turning them into really viable damage options. The breath spells encompass multiple elements of damage and even Scarlet Rot status, and that's not including the amazingly powerful Grail's Roar that deals significant damage and an extra debuff that decreases enemy attack and defense power. The only complaint I can even think of is the lunch break sized amount of time it takes to spool most of these up, but like, that's not even a huge deal anymore since the hyper armor now allows you to tank literal falling star beasts. Getting trampled by a 5-ton space horse with fangs? Nah, here at the Dragon Communion School you just walk that shit off. Godslayer incantations are mega useful for anyone doing low-level playthroughs because all of these incantations scale off of the target's max HP. Even against enemies with fire resistance, these are still a great pick because the lingering damage still chews up a huge amount of HP if it's a large enemy or a boss. I especially like the Ritual incantation because it can stun a lot of different enemies out of attacks, and it can really trivialize the Black Knife assassins with proper placement. These incantations are also one of the only spell types that incorporate the outfit you're wearing into how powerful your spells are. How the Godskin Noble Robe increases the power of Noble Presence by about 20%. And although I do think a couple other schools benefited from exploring this perk a bit, like the Crucible incantations, I'm a little annoyed that they couldn't have picked, I don't know, like the bracelets or the leggings, or it's something other than the ugliest chess piece in the game to give this bonus. I'm a little bitter about that. The Blood Oath incantations require Faith and Arcane to be used, making them pair decently with Dragon Communion spells. 3 of the 4 spells also deal fire damage in addition to inflicting high blood loss, so it's not exactly the most versatile type you could use, but it at least refrains from being a magic type that revolves solely around hemorrhaging. Blood Boon seems to only ever fire at your enemy's feet, and even then it seems to stop just short, so free aiming at small groups tends to be the best way to see any use out of it. Not exactly a complaint, but it's still something worth knowing. It stands out as an area denial tool because the blood pools leave lingering spaces of fire on the ground for a few seconds, and smaller enemies tend to get stunned by them. Despite having multiple stat requirements, it's not at all difficult to tailor a build towards these because the requirements don't ever seem to go above the teens. And that's really important because you find 3 of these at late to end game locations, so leveling up one of your stats a few times just to use the spell doesn't seem like a huge commitment, even if you've spent the entire game working towards a certain build. Go around spreading the plague, sneezing and farting and shitting on everyone that dares challenge your power. I'm not a fan of status builds in general, but significantly less so when it involves status ailments that are built to be outclassed later on. To start off, you only have 4 to choose from, and 2 of them being poison-based have extremely low requirements, which is all the evidence you need to realize you shouldn't be using these anywhere past Altus. The only Scarlet-based spell leaves you on the ground helpless and defenseless for way longer than it needs to, and it takes up 3 slots. That leaves Pest Threads as the single most competent spell that the Servants of Rot School has to offer, and even then my only compliment there is that it's not useless. It's able to take out big chunks of HP from large enemies that are susceptible to getting hit by multiple projectiles, but it's not like that's your only option if you like shredding apart giant bosses. This whole type here just doesn't do it for me. It's kind of a letdown that the major gimmick of this spell set is to inflict madness, which as a status only has effect on other players and NPC invaders. The Frenzied Flame incantations also have a longer than average spool up time, and the application of madness means spells like Inescapable Frenzy have very limited utility, which means to a lot of us PvEers, the Frenzied Flame school is more flame. It's just more fire spells. And that's not by any means a bad thing. Frenzied Flame spells can be adequately boosted by other fire-related talismans, buffs, and other spells. Unendurable Frenzy is another Gatling gun spell with an additional attack after you decide to end the spell. And since this attack is technically the end part of the spell, it requires no FP to take advantage of. Even considering Madness is pretty much worthless in PvE, that doesn't really translate to the entire spell type being just as useless, because truthfully, some of these can easily contend with the highest damage fire incantations in the game. It has the same pros and cons of the cold sorceries, I think, where the limited array of spells give you exactly one build to truly play with, but that one build has all the versatility and synergy you would ever need in a single character. Anyways, yeah, the vehicles have like individual components that break apart in combat, and there's this thing that like shows you exactly where you took damage, and they're giving out these huge bonus packs to anyone that makes an account through this special link, and like they got like thousands of different vehicles you can choose
we're gonna
from.
be here for a while, huh?
Friends and...
That's all you got.